And there goes my video.
All right. So I want to talk about Yakats. The word Yakats is not necessarily a familiar word, not one that we use in other contexts, although it comes from the word chatzah, to divide in two. And interestingly enough, it was only a few weeks back that we had Shabbat Shekalim, which was one of the 4 Shabbatot that leads up to Passover. And the chetzi shekel, the half shekel, was what people were asked to contribute. So we already heard the word in another form. Half is what we are going to make of one of the matzot. We're going to break a matzah. Which one? Which one are we going to break? Herma, you mouthed it, but I couldn't read your lips.
The middle.
The middle matzah. Okay, very good. That's like ventriloquism right there. Nicely done. The middle matzah. Why the middle one? Well, we're going to come back to that question. Once the matzah is broken, what are we going to do with this matzah? Do we eat it? That would seem to be logical or reasonable. After all, don't we refer to getting together with another person for a meal as breaking bread? That's exactly what we're doing here. So why not have at it and eat this matzah that we have just broken? Well, the answer is, I think, that the matzah is more than just a food when it comes to the Seder. Matzah is a symbol. In fact, along with the zroa, the shank bone, which represents the Paschal lamb, and the maror, the bitter herbs, it is one of the 3 primary symbols of the Pesach Seder. And we will eat matzah, but not yet. Not yet. Having broken it, we have aroused curiosity, brought to the fore questions, and the need to give some explanation as to why the matzah is such an important part of the Seder. So if we're going to discuss the matzah, half of this broken matzah is going to return to the table. Anyone know which of the 2 halves, smaller or larger, returns to the table?
Larger.
Incorrect, but good guess.
Oh, damn.
The larger one will become the afikomen. It's the smaller one that returns to the table and can be eaten later. But it makes sense in a certain way that the smaller one, the lesser half, is the one that we are going to not hide, but actually refer to, because right after Yakats comes Magid, the telling of the story. And Magid begins with the words, Halachma anya, diachalu avatana ba'ara de Mitzrayim. This, and we hold up the matzah, this is the bread of affliction which our ancestors ate in Egypt. The bread of affliction or the bread of poverty. Taking the lesser half only increases the message that this is poor man's bread, very little to be consumed. And you'll excuse my having used a sexist term, poor person's bread, I should have said. There is just not a lot to go around. And so we are reminded of what it means to be a slave and to be deprived by the fact that it is the smaller matzah that we're going to hold up as we begin our Seder retelling of the story and in the invitation to the guests to come and join us at this meal, which could be pitiful, but in the end it turns out to be anything but, because of the large assortment of foods that usually are served at a Passover Seder. Does the afikomen really need to be hidden, this other half? This is a question that one might ask. The Shulchan Aruch, which is a code of Jewish law, recommends that this larger piece of matzah actually be placed under the tablecloth in a hidden spot, so to speak, rather than remaining visible on the table together with all of the other symbolic foods. And the reason for this is to recall the way that the Israelites carried their kneading trowels and the matzot that they had baked. For we are told, and this occurs in the Torah in the book of Exodus, just after the 10th plague, just after the killing of the firstborn of Egypt, when all of Egypt is mourning and wailing, and what they want more than anything else is for the Israelites to be gone, to leave. They are impatient to have them out of their country. Vayisa ha'am et betseko terem yachmatz meshiarotam surot besimlotam al shichmam, is what the Torah says. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls wrapped in their cloaks upon their shoulders. Now, amongst Sephardic Jews, there is actually a custom of placing the wrapped afikomen in a bag and throwing it over one's shoulder and walking around the Seder table so as to relive the experience of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of the Exodus. We should do just as our ancestors did. One of the old commentaries, Midrashic commentaries, the Mechilta, points out that the mitzvah of carrying the unleavened bread out of Egypt was so great, it was too great to allow the animals to do it. Everything else you might have put on the back of your donkey, but not the unleavened bread. This each individual Jew had to do for him or herself, carrying the matzah out of Egypt. Now, placing it under the tablecloth or in a napkin is one thing, but hiding it would seem to be something quite different. And where does that tradition come from? Well, there is an obscure comment or statement in the Talmud that says, Chotvin matzah b'leilei pesachim bishvil tinokot shelo yishnu. We make haste to get to the matzah, and in this case they mean to the meal, on the nights of Passover, for the sake of the children, so that they should not fall asleep. And yes, there are people who drag out the first half of the Seder quite a bit, and so you've got to do whatever you can to entertain kids, and we'll talk about that in a short while. But even in the time of the Talmud, they seem to recognize that kids only have so much of an attention span. You're going to want to get to the meal. But this opening word of the statement, chotvin, creates a problem because chataf not only means to make haste, but it also means to snatch. And so now you have a directive, an instruction from the Talmud to snatch the matzah on this night as a diversion, again, for the sake of the children, so that they will not fall asleep. So by a show of hands, how many have in your homes the tradition that the children steal the afikomen and hide it, and the leader of the Seder needs to go find it? Only a couple. So I'm going to guess, but I'll ask for a show of hands anyway. And so in your other cases, is it the case that the leader hides it and the kids have to find it? Okay. So either one works, right? If the kids take it, then they can ransom it and get prizes in order to return it so that it can be eaten at the end of the Seder. But if it's been hidden and the kids have to go searching for it, that is also a very fun custom. And just as an aside, I will tell you that I got creative a few years ago. I'm sure I read this in a book somewhere, that instead of hiding one afikomen and then having some kids crying because they didn't get to find it, I counted up the number of children who were going to be at my Seder in advance. And before the night arrived, I hid afikomens all over the house, one for every child to find. And that way, the kids who found it first knew that there were more and could help the younger children or the others who hadn't found one in their search. And at the end, everybody came back and had something to show for their excursion. So hiding the matzah is a wonderful diversion and a way of keeping kids interested for the evening. But why is it the middle matzah? And I asked that at the beginning. Anyone have a thought as to why not the top matzah? I mean, this is the first thing we're doing with matzah. It would seem reasonable to take the one that's right at the top and lift that up and break it. But instead, we dig into the middle and pull out the one that is sandwiched between the top and the bottom. Anyone have a thought about that? Okay. I think, although I can't prove it, I think it has to do with the fact that this is the matzah that we are going to create a hidden piece of. So we're going to take the one that's hidden in the middle. And this is a foreshadowing of what is going to happen after Yakats. Take out the middle matzah, but only a part of it is going back, because the other part is going to, in this essence, remain hidden until it is needed at the very end of the Seder. The other thing you can do with this midrashically, and this can open up some conversation at your Seder table, is to ask people why it is that we have 3 matzot. And there are a variety of reasons offered, a variety of suggestions. Does anyone here have one? A reason that you've heard for why there are 3 matzot on the Seder table? Yes, Renee.
Kohen, Levi, and Israelites.
Beautiful, right. So we remember the three designations of Jews that we have today. Of the 12 tribes, all we can seemingly relate back to at this point is you're either from the Kohen line, the Levi line, and if not, then you're an Israelite. So that's one of the great explanations. Any others?
A compromise of when you make motzi, when you bless on a Friday night with chalot, with a challah, you do it over two. Of course, so it wouldn't make sense if you only had two and then you broke 1.5. Then you'd have 1.5, and maybe that is a good thing, or maybe you should have two. So by having three, it makes it much easier.
I love that. And yes, there is a debate amongst the rabbis about whether we should have 2 or 3 matzot. And they fell out on the 3, so that if you're going to break one early on, you'll still have 2 whole ones over which to make the blessings of motzi matzah later. Thank you. Thanks. The other explanation that I heard early on is that the 3 matzot represent our 3 forefathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And if the middle matzah, which therefore is associated with Isaac, is being broken, it is a reminder to us that he was the broken one of the 3, right? Isaac, who is sort of a shadow of the other forefathers, who does not really do a whole lot. And a lot of the commentary makes a great deal about the fact that he is not as prominent as Abraham and Jacob. Abraham, the father of our faith, who makes the journey, and Jacob, who fathers the 12 tribes of Israel. But what does Isaac have to say for himself? The best that we can say about him, I guess, is that he makes sure that the line continues, but word left to him, he was going to give the blessing to the older son, Esav, instead of Isaac. And it was only because he was duped by Jacob and his wife, Rebekah. So in a sense, he was the broken one. And maybe that is something you can talk about at your Seder, about what it means to be broken, and what about Isaac makes him somewhat lesser than the others. Okay, there is a wonderful commentary in the Feast of Freedom, which is the Haggadah that I like to use and which we'll be using for our virtual Seder. Let me hold it up again. This is the one created by the Rabbinical Assembly. It's already a number of years old, but it's the one that I decided to invest in years ago and have multiple copies of. So when people come to my home, everybody can have the same one. At the same time that I like to pass out other versions of the Haggadah so that people can be looking for other commentaries as we go. But in the Feast of Freedom, it says that Yakats, the breaking of the middle matzah, is a silent, reflective act wherein part of the matzah is concealed to be searched out before the blessings that conclude the meal may be recited. When will this broken piece be brought back and eaten? Just after the meal, just before we say Birkat HaMazon, the bracha. And it is the larger piece of the middle matzah that is concealed. For more is hidden than is revealed, said the rabbis. Within us, individually and collectively, there are prayers to be fulfilled, promises to be redeemed. We are like the matzah, incomplete, and our children in their searching are extensions of our exploration. Remember how we prepared for the holiday. What did we do? We searched. There was a searching that took place just before the holiday, and that was bedikat chametz, looking for the chametz that might be hidden in our homes. And now, symbolically, we end the Seder with another search, not for chametz, but for its opposite, for matzah. To know there is concealment is to know that we must work for revealment, for completion, says the Haggadah. As with Yakats, with the breaking, so with eating the afikomen, no blessing is to be recited. So when we break it, we don't say a blessing. When we eat the afikomen, we don't say a separate blessing. No word is spoken because this is what the rabbis call wordless discovery. Wordless discovery. It is all in the actions and in the looking forward to what is yet to be revealed. Pesach, as we know, is the time of liberation, the time of redemption. But we who sit at a Seder table can look back at that redemption and also recognize that we don't yet live in a world redeemed. there is still a lot of work to be done before this can be a world that we will describe as Yemei HaMashiach, the time of the Messiah. And until it comes, we have work to do. And when that will come is the great unknown. So the Afikomen represents the hiddenness of the ultimate redemption. And we will search and we will search and we will search. And God willing, eventually we will come to that day. But in the meantime, we'll enjoy our Seder meal. And that's it. That's all I've got to say.
Okay, Sydney and I are going to jump in for the next piece of our evening together. We're going to talk a little bit about how to engage your younger Seder attendees, although the things that we're going to share can actually be fun for people of all ages. The first just very basic things that I'm going to offer you is obviously have your kids help you set the table, create a centerpiece, make place cards if people are coming, and get them involved in the cooking. So I'm also going to share with you something that I started doing 2 years ago to really bring the holiday feel to my table. So Sydney, I think, is going to share for me. And actually, I think I started this 2 years ago. I think when Erica, Elrod, and Tom, their family came to my house, I think they inspired me to step up my game. So I cannot take credit for the idea, only the implementation of my tablescape. So what I did, and you'll see this in 2 pictures in just a second.
Everybody see? Can I get a thumbs up? Everyone
I can see it.
Great.
So what I did, I'm going to have you scroll down in a second. As you could see, just to go to the top, my table I created to look like the Israelites crossing when the sea parted. So you could see I use, you could use whatever you have in your house. I happen to have a son who played with a lot of superhero action figures. So I had them in my house. So I use them as the Israelites, but you could certainly use anything you have in Legos. And another thing that I also put on the table, and you can actually scatter this anywhere on the table, is I love Magna Tiles. I think they're a great toy for kids of really all ages. And I made them into little pyramids. And it's also great because during the Seder, if your guests, are a little antsy, they could always break them apart, take them apart and put them back together and build with them. And they're an object and they're a conversation piece. And it's just a great way of actually getting to like reenact parts of the Seder. So it's something that I've been doing. I did it even last year, and you could see I had like a beige tablecloth, and I actually went to a fabric store and just got 2 strips of blue fabric. It's not anything fancy. It cost me like $4. And I think it just really makes, it really sets apart the holiday, because you would never set your table like this on a Shabbat or on any other holiday of the year. So it's something that I've done. I think a friend of mine who's another Jewish educator saw it, and I actually saw it also on Pinterest, which obviously is a great place to go for ideas. All right.
And also, I just want to point out earlier, before when Susan was explaining what was memorable about her Passover and how she was engaged, this is something that when they're little, they'll think it's fun. There's something tangible touch, there's something sensory about it, which is so great to get them engaged. But even as kids get older, it becomes more funny and silly. And then maybe it's something that they'll, turn into and remember as like that one cool thing that you did at your Seder.
Right. So it's something that I've done. I even last year when we really just had a Zoom Seder and it was only the 5 of us, I decided to do it anyway to make the holiday still feel special. And I will, I actually have like a Passover box I keep in my basement. I will bring out the box that I keep the fabric in and use it every year. Again, well worth the $3 or whatever is investment. And you could see I also put things around the table. Like I have a million different kinds of frogs that I've collected. So I pull them out every year. My favorite are these frogs. I don't know if I'll show them to you in just a second after the screen share, but they're like the ones that you could like flip. So it's always fun to do a little contest. You can make their frog flip the farthest. So I think this is just a great way to like get really involved in the holiday and really make it feel really beautiful. All right, Sydney, you could stop the share.
I will stop sharing. Another thing that, to piggyback off of what Shira said about the physical tablescape, which is super fun. This is something that we actually do in our preschool currently. So if we have any preschool families, this might not be so novel to you, but printing out and something as simple as these adorable little puppets make the Seder a little more hands-on. So while you're telling your story, when you get to the story part of the Seder, you have your Haggadah, who has the story in it, but having a visual. So when you're talking about Moses in his basket, you have him floating around, and we have Pharaoh's daughter who finds him. I won't go through the whole scenario, but the trick also that I found that's kind of a hack is we have them numbered on the back. So this way your Seder leader can remember where they are. I know that for me, I sometimes get sidetracked or people have questions. So it's great to have them numbered. You know, we have Moses is growing. Here we have our good old Pharaoh. And this is something that you can really just, you know, we purchased this set for our staff, but you could also easily find them online. And we're going to link some resources in the chat box in a second. You know, for example, we get to the plagues. You know, you can feel free to edit the plagues however you see fit. For our, you know, preschoolers, we do a little bit of a different firstborn scenario. The firstborn gets sick, you know, kind of like adapt it to what your family's needs are. And so that's another great thing, is having some books to engage with your little ones. This one's especially nice. I believe it's a PJ Library book. You can get PJ Library. They're a great resource if you're not familiar and you have grandkids or kids of your own. I would definitely recommend checking out. It was a great one. This one's about company coming over. So whether your company is coming over on Zoom or in person, it's still explain parts of the Seder. It's tangible. There's a little flip section. Another great, this one's a little, probably on the older side. Another great, it's from Carben Publishing, which you can also find online. I especially like this one because it has real life children in it, showing what goes on during the Seder, the steps of it. You know, the kids are getting ready, talking about springtime, which we do talk about in the preschool, about, you know, getting ready to clean out. I know last week at Shabbat, our puppets were getting ready and cleaning. And so this book's another fun one, another resource to help get your little involved with not only the actual Seder, but getting ready for Passover, which is a huge part of the holiday. Sure, I'm ready to share the other part when you are.
Okay, you could share just a second. I also just want to mention, in terms of the plagues, there are really a lot of things you could do to be creative. I think anyone would appreciate having like ping pongs thrown at their table if you want to represent some hail. If you want to put food coloring in some water to make something that looks like blood, depending on your audience. It's just always fun, I think, to have visuals, just add something to the experience. And again, there's so many creative ideas, and they do sell obviously plague bags, but sometimes I find that the stuff in them aren't always so user-friendly. So you could always make your own. So anyone who, I just want to mention, has children in our preschool or religious school, or anyone wants to request a bag, one thing we're including in it is a coloring book Haggadah that the kids can, you know, look at during Passover, during the Seder, but also obviously they could create it before so that they have their own Haggadah to go through and look at and feel proud of. So Cindy's going to show you really briefly. This is a really nice one that we found that we really loved, especially because it does incorporate both Hebrew and English. So even if the kids don't read, I think it's still important that they see that that there is Hebrew in there. That's our language for our Seder. So I just love this one. And we will again give these out. And if you want extra copies for anyone, just let us know. We're happy to give them to you or send you the PDF. So that's a really fun resource that we found. I wanted to share with you. It's one of the best ones I've seen.
I'm just going to pop into the chat in a second some of the other resources that you can kind of peruse on your own time. One really great one is from PJ Library. There's a whole section that talks about things you could do at your Zoom Seder. So again, I know someone mentioned earlier not having a Zoom Seder, but that's great. And you can, these things are good for Zoom and not Zoom. So one of the things that I thought was super fun that I want to definitely incorporate into my Seder is when you get to the part where they cross the Dead Sea. So here I have my puppet to show you how I would do this. Go around the room and ask everyone to show what their victory dance, like their happy dance would be. You made it across the Red Sea. Everyone stand up from your table and do your dance. And this is a great way to get anybody of all ages out of their seat, depending on how long your Seder is. It's a great time to get up, stand up, give a little shake, and get everyone re-energized for the rest of the program. Another fun one was, I know I wrote notes on this, you know, when you're talking about Dayenu, and this would have been enough, and being thankful, going around and just giving an opportunity for everyone to say something that they're thankful for. So these are things. I'm going to pop this into the side, into the chat, so you can go look and see. There's a whole list, and there, and on PJ Library, it indicates a section for younger kids, older kids. So whatever the gamut is of children that you're entertaining during your Passover Seder, there are some great suggestions. And the other thing I'm going to pop into the chat in a second is a YouTube link to a song that our preschoolers are learning with our new song leader, who joins us virtually from Virginia. And this song has hand motions. I'm not going to sing it for you. I will save all of your ears, which is why we have our great song leader. But the fact that you can find these resources on YouTube, there's hand motions, which I'll pop into the chat, as well as a really great album by Shira Klein. It's called Shir La La Pesach, and it's all these great Passover songs. So it includes your frogs and dig with your hammer, all the classics, if you will. I'm sure you've all heard of all of these songs, and it's another great resource. You can either find it on your Amazon Music or Spotify or wherever you stream music from. I'm pretty sure it's easy to find, and I'll also link that on the side as well.
So one more thing that I just want to mention, you know, growing up, I grew up in a household where we all use the same Seder, the same Haggadah at our Seder. At my husband's Seders, they all use different ones, which used to drive me crazy because I think I liked like consistent readings and things that match. But sort of I've created a hybrid experience in my own Seder, so everyone does have their own Haggadah that matches each other. But now I like to bring in supplements from other Haggadot, because over the past several years, they've come out with really cool ones. So I like went into my pastor bin. There's these, I don't know if you've seen them, but a different night Haggadah. These are like, have great teaching resources. And I love this one. And this is another one that's like it. Last year, I think maybe 2 years ago, I got the Kveller Haggadah, another one of my new favorites. I was really being inspired by the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, so I had to get her Haggadah. Not so great, but interesting nonetheless. A sitcom Seder, the New American Haggadah, and also a Passover Haggadah graphic novel. So the other thing about having these is that if you have anyone at the table who has trouble keeping attention, it's a great thing to have people look at, because they could also like read through it. And every year I kind of mark my book I have become my Seder leader. I know you're surprised. So I like mark off, these are like the pages I marked off from last year. So you could share from other resources. And just looking at this graphic novel, it's just really cool to look at. And there's all these stories and narrative that goes along with it for the different parts of the Seder. So again, if you have someone who has trouble keeping focus, it's a great way to keep them engaged in something relevant and interesting. So that's something I'm definitely going to have all these out for my Seders this year. I'll probably have more Haggadahs than people, so that'll work.
Well, thank you to Shira and Sydney. I'm gonna wrap things up with a quick presentation, and then we want to give some room for questions and answers, because I hope that this evening has sparked some thoughts. Now that we're thinking that Passover isn't just the distant idea, but rather something that's actually coming up, that we actually can start thinking about our own and connect to the idea of Seder coming up. So be thinking about our own Seders. Before I jump into the traditional, I'm curious of, has anyone over the years added anything onto their own Seder plates or their Seder table that you don't find in I guess I'll say a traditional Haggadah. I know that there's the example of an orange, so I'll throw that out there at first. But has anyone put anything else on their Seder plates or their table to spark discussion? Ellen, I think were you shaking your head?
Yeah, I have a Miriam's cup that I
Okay,
made
great.
one of our groups that we did.
Fantastic. It's interesting to see how things over the generation, I know how certain things I'm sure if you ask some of our the youngest participants at the Seder table, they might say, oh, a Miriam's cup, of course you have a Miriam's cup. And it's interesting to see how, some of the symbols that we have on the table, how they've made their way into the Seder. And I'm curious now of the stack that Shira has to find out, how many of those Haggadot actually have reference to a Miriam's cup in the Seder, or is it something that you have to remember to do? Anyone else? And we'll get back to why I mentioned that. Anyone else have any other interesting things they've either brought to their Seder table? Yeah. Oh, okay. Erica, and then I'll come to Herma.
We've done orange in the past, and I think this year we were going to add a banana.
Okay, adding a banana.
And we do a beet instead of a. I didn't get that. Oh, sorry. We do a beet instead of the shank bone, but also a banana. I read there's an article I'll pull up and I'll share in the chat, but about some other ways to address social justice through the Seder and these representations. And so the banana stems from refugee children, which a lot of you know, but I work with refugee kids. And it was a story about, it's actually really sad, but some children who died on their journey to Europe in a boat crossing, and their dad shared that like one of their favorite things was bananas. And so it's like this story that's sort of translated, but to represent refugee children and crossings and how we hope that everyone gets the freedom they deserve. And that in our time, that's still something that's not happening for everyone.
Thank you, Erica. I know that for many, maybe the banana is a new thing that they've heard. I also appreciate the personal connection. I actually have a resource about that, and I'll share in the chat in just a few minutes. Herma, you're muted right now. But
yeah, a couple of years ago, somebody from Sisterhood had recommended putting small picture frames with pictures of family members who are no longer with us around the table to share so that they are there with us.
Herma, I love that. And especially this past year, and also maybe even this year, when we can't have all of those family members that are still alive at our own Seder tables, how wonderful it is to have those pictures. I actually, a few years ago at a Seder, as there was one year, it was very quiet. I think it was just my parents and myself. I think there were some Seder guests that were not able to make it that night that we had planned on. And it was a small group. And so what I had done when we got to Manishtana, because I did not want to ask the questions myself, instead what I did was I quickly walked around the house, grabbed pictures of each of us, of the different family members. And I said, actually in the Talmud, the thing is, what is if there's a child there, they should ask the questions. And what about if it's a scholar, just a scholar by themselves, they too should also ask the questions themselves. So I had everyone look at a picture of themselves and ask, and sing Manishtana. So it was my way of getting out of, doing the 4 questions myself as the youngest at the table, but also a beautiful way, Herma, you just mentioned about, bringing in loved ones to our own Seder. I think I bring up all this is because there are wonderful things that people have added. Now the question is, where do we add them? And it might seem strange that I love the part at the right before the meal. I'm sure most of us get to, through the Seder, we're getting to the Maggid section of the retelling. We get to Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel has his 3 items, and probably people kind of rush through this because, well, it gets to my favorite part. That's where we're going to get to building, eating the charosets and eating the maror, and of course, eating the meal. So I think that it makes it kind of fast, right? Rabban Gamliel says that there are 3 things that we're supposed to signify This is one of the Haggadot that share reference. This is a different night. The beautiful thing, actually, because of coronavirus, our website, tsina.com/Passover, has actually a free download that is still up from last year. So you too can have this available. And so Rabban Gamliel says you're supposed to recognize 3 items, and those 3 items are, well, the Pesach, the shank bone, or for those that are vegetarian, or for me last year who could not find a shank bone when things were crazy at House of Kosher last year, I too had a beets on my Seder plates as to represent the Korban Pesach. So we have the Pesach lamb, and then we have the matzah and the maror. And you might think this is strange, right? These are all items that we've already talked about during the Seder. So why are we talking about them now? It's an interesting point that I think we have to think about a little bit, because this is a unique experience. So often, nowhere else in our liturgy insists that we explain mitzvot in addition to doing them. Why does Rabban Gamliel require us to explain them here, right? Instead of just going through the actions, how many of us get to the, look at our Seder plates, we mention, okay, here's the Seder plates either in front of us, that there's one large one, or as Rabbi Welberg shared, you could have smaller ones passed out throughout. But the idea that we have to do something about it, we can't just point to it, we have to say something about it. Of course, the interesting thing about the Pesach lamb is we don't actually, many of us do not eat lamb, those of us that do eat meat, do not eat lamb on Passover. There's, while there are some communities that do, many people are worried that they don't want to, because there's so much significance about the Pesach sacrifice that was offered specifically on the night of Pesach, that they don't want to really confuse anything or get anything wrong. So while there might be some that might have the tradition of serving lamb, it is not the widespread of all of us serving lamb. So it's interesting, we don't eat this one, but we do point and we talk about it. The same is, well, we're going to get to matzah and we're going to eat it. But here we're supposed to talk about it. And here we're getting into psukim, into verses from the Torah readings that talk about these items. So there's something about not just doing the blessing over the matzah, not just doing the blessing over maror, but to talk about it as well. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who passed away this past year, who was the chief rabbi, one of the former chief rabbi in the United Kingdom, he writes a beautiful passage here. He says, "The story explains the food. The food allows us to relive the story. The Passover lamb symbolizes freedom. The maror represents slavery. Matzah combines both. It was the bread that the Israelites ate in Egypt as slaves. It was also the bread that they ate when leaving Egypt as free people." And I think that there's something about this, that all of this is to make this point that we're supposed to experience something for ourselves, right? By, how many of us love having a culinary experience? It's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to eat about it. I think that's an important thing this year, whether you're in person with all of your guests or also, leading a virtual Seder, is that hopefully it's not just going to be pointing and saying, here, I have this Seder plate next to me. But hopefully you'll be able to say, we might not be able to be all together, and maybe we're not able to share in recipes. Of course, that is a beautiful thing of to make people feel connected. Share the recipes that you're cooking ahead of time with others, so you can all experience the same food if you're not able to physically gather. But to actually eat the food at the same time, to feel those senses, and that makes a big difference. There's something about when I love that when we were talking about all these different items earlier, about how many of us have put an orange on our Seder plates, and maybe and the orange is an interesting example because there are some that say it's because to support the LGBT community, and some say it's because about a woman on the bima is like putting a orange on the Seder plates. So there's different origin stories. I just caught myself in that about where it comes from. But I was hearing a colleague during the Rabbinical Assembly convention. Her name is Rabbi Gisa Ederberg, who's a German rabbi. She's based in Berlin. And she made this point that at her own Seder, it's not just those three. Think about with Rabbi Wahlberg, he had shared of the three matzot that we have in the beginning. And of course, when we get to at the end of the Seder, there's echad miodea. Who knows? Three. Three is for the papas. It's for the patriarchs. Well, it's not surprising that you see three items here: Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. Sheep argues, well, is it so bad to maybe have four? What is number four? Four is, if three is for the papas, four is for the mothers, the mamas, right?
Mamas.
Thank you. So maybe it's not so bad so she makes the joke here of saying maybe this is breaking the patriarchy and bringing in the fourth item of, but I think that there's something even more important that she says. She doesn't just put an orange on her Seder plate. She actually slices the orange slices like a youth soccer game where halftime comes and she passes out those orange slices, because I think the whole point here is that it's not just pointing to the items on the Seder plate. It's also about eating them as well, having that additional sensory experience. And I think that that's so important because, Ellen, I when you mentioned the Miriam's cup, okay, I think many of us do it at the same time as Eliyahu's cup, of Elijah's cup. And I wonder how many Seders, Haggadot, have that already written in. But there are some of these pieces as well of, Erica, I hope when you bring the banana this year, it's not just going to be a banana sitting on the table, but at one point, slice it open. And I hope you pass it out, because now it doesn't just become, oh, I hope I mentioned this at some point. But instead it becomes, there's something about this. We can talk about it. We can eat it. There's more of a conversation about it. And I wanted just to share all of that because I think it brings it all together. So while we're going through the Seder, don't just, eat your parsley. Hopefully you'll also ask the question of what is giving you the sense of spring and rebirth this year. And when you eat your charoset, don't just say the blessing, but use what Rabban Gamliel is saying for us is that we're supposed to talk about it. So also, when you're eating the charoset, this stickiness that's supposed to be like mortar, also ask the question of what is connecting us together. Or if you want as well, I'm having trouble sharing the document I wanted to share right now into the chat. So I will make sure that this makes its way to our Passover website. So I'll try one more time while we're doing Q&A. But there was a wonderful suggestion last year that I had shared. Actually happens to be from someone from Beth Or, Jan Zasmer, who suggested that we should put a piece of bubble gum on our Seder plates, because hopefully during this time of the pandemic, we should stick together. So not only just to point there, but hopefully we also engage with it with more of our senses. So I wanted to just leave us with that thought of taking Rabban Gamliel, of not only do we do the mitzvot that we're required to do, but also to talk about it, and why not also eat it as well? At this time, we have a few minutes left that we were wanting to join together. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us tonight. But I know there's also lots of questions that people might have specifically that either they're thinking about, in practicality of something they're trying to figure out for their own Seder this year, or and might want to brainstorm it with a group, or perhaps there's something that you want to reflect upon, something that we had shared tonight. So if anyone has any questions or reactions or wants to brainstorm an idea for this year, this is the time.
Rabbi Sam, I'm so glad that you mentioned the tradition of not only putting an orange on the Seder plate, but actually dividing it up and letting people share it. Because if you just have the orange there, you say it's a symbol of women's equality, which is good. But if we all get to taste the inside of the orange, then maybe we'll remember that we're all orange Jews.
Ooh.
Very bad, very bad.
Oh, that was bad.
We should also remind people that this is a good time to recycle Purim costumes. You can take lots of costumes and make them characters that would be appropriate for the Passover Seder. Maybe Superman or Wonder Woman was one of the characters who came out of Egypt. And anything that is dress up that encourages kids to, again, be diverted so that they can stay up or ask questions is a good thing.
I'll share one thing about the costumes is that I think while I look forward to the day when we can all be together in person, the one interesting thing about teaching on Zoom this past year has been that the advantage of having people in their own homes is, unlike being in synagogue where people are sitting in the pews, well, people are in their natural environment and they have props near them. So how often during religious school tefillah, I might say, when we're learning about Havdalah, I'll say, hold up your Kiddush cup and pretend to do so. Of course, because of preschool, I always have a Kiddush cup next to me. I'm not sure how many of you also have a Kiddush cup next to you because of our own services, but it's amazing. So many kids will pick up, they'll have a cup of glass next to them, or they'll get creative of different things. And it is something this year that if you are doing Zoom, or even a hybrid experience as well, of bringing in the objects. We think about the Seder symbols that we put physically on the table, but how many of the things that we have around our house, that we can also bring in. So those are all wonderful ideas that you can also bring in to engage people, even if they're not in the same physical space. You can always ask, someone to hold up a symbol that reminds them of spring or of freedom. And you might find 30 seconds later, someone's run across their house and brought it to show on screen. Well, I'm glad everyone's prepared for Passover this year. Much better than last year. So this is great. So I just want to say a thank you to my colleagues, Shira Weisbach and Sydney with Cement and Rabbi Wahlberg for sharing tonight. And hopefully others will be able to also enjoy some of these ideas if they listen to the recording later. I apologize, I wasn't able to share the symbols that I wanted to share, like what Erica referenced. Many of those are available online, but if you email me, I will share them, but we'll also get them up onto the website as well. And since no one else is unmuted, I'll just say Chag Kasher Sameach. I hope everyone has a wonderful Passover, and I'm sure we'll see many of you soon.
Can we remind everyone that Sunday night we've got the special service in preparation for the holiday, and on Monday evening, Shira and Sydney are leading a special baking workshop on peach kugel, which everyone here will want to add to your Seder this year. Yes. And please join us next Thursday morning for our Siyum. Since the first Seder is on Saturday night, rather than firstborns being invited to fast on the day leading up to the Seder, it's pushed back to Thursday. And as part of the morning service, we'll have some study led by Rabbi Hollander. The Siyum, the completion of a section of study, allows those who would otherwise have to fast to eat. And everybody's encouraged to come and do some learning with us early Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Thanks, everyone.